we can take a lot of inspiration from our engineering friends in this department. I think engineering is always like at least a few years ahead in any companies, because they are usually the first people to start working at a startup. And you would always see that how engineering matures. They would put a lot of emphasis on documentation and how they have these processes, rituals and different meetings. And you can always take a lot of inspiration from them, because slowly you would also be going into that direction as a design team.
Hi everyone, welcome to Designdrives, where we explore why, how and what design and designers are driving forward. The mission is to interview the most forward-thinking designers and innovative creators on the planet to inspire and help you to reach your full creative potential as a designer and to drive a positive impact in the world. In the episode, I chat with Darshan Gajara, head of design at GraphCMS, a growing startup based in Berlin, and he's also the creator of Product Disrupt, which is a popular newsletter and website for design resources, links towards the best design blogs, the best podcasts, the best resources, and also a really great newsletter for advancing yourself as a designer. With Darshan, we talk about what it means to join an early stage startup as a designer, as he joined GraphCMS as the founding designer, what it means to grow together with the team and the company as a designer, and what kind of challenges come ahead as you work in such an environment. We also learn why and how you can use the power of online education and inspiration online to advance yourself as a designer using good resources and online programs. I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, we are here with Darshan Gajara. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sebastian, for having me here. Really glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so for people to set some context, you are head of design at GraphCMS, which is a startup based in Berlin, just have been going to some rounds of funding, which I think is very impressive. And you have been also the maker and founder and host of the newsletter and website called Product Disrupt, which I'm a fan of since a long time. And I think you're doing some really amazing work there. We're going to make sure for the people interested in to link this in the description. But I think what would be really great, before we're going to go into talking about your experience working as a designer in a startup, seeing that experience from, as the startup is scaling, talking about product disrupt and talking about the education aspect, it would be really great, Darshan, if you could give the audience a bit of context about yourself, talking a little bit about your journey, and just to set some context for the audience.
Yeah, sure thing. And first of all, thanks a lot, Sebastian, for the kind words. It's always great to see that people around the world find your content useful. A little bit about me. So my name is Darshan. I'm a designer and maker currently living in Berlin, but I'm originally from Mumbai, India. And I moved to Berlin about 2 years ago. So I currently head design here at GraphCMS. GraphCMS is a GraphQL native headless content management system, which allows companies of all sizes to host and scale their content across all platforms. And apart from this, I also run a side project called as Product Disrupt, which is a curated list of resources to learn product design from the internet and absolutely for free. It also has a newsletter, which I've been running for about 4.5 years. So the newsletter goes out every 2 weeks, where I do the curation of free resources to learn design or create your own digital products, and also to get design inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I think what would be maybe interesting to give people some context. I mean, you have been designing in India for some time now, then moved to Germany, of course, first working at Contentful and now at GraphCMS. If you look back at the work that you were doing, so do you have any sort of particular project that you maybe had in the past where you really had the feeling that you can have a positive impact through your work as a designer?
Yeah, there's one project that comes to my mind. So before moving to Berlin, I worked as a consultant for about 3 years. And working as a consultant, I got the opportunity to work with customers from literally all parts of the world. So I had people that I was working with who are from UAE, UK, Canada, Australia, US and India, of course. So there was this one client of mine called Sapad. They are a food tech company based in Dubai. They have their presence in the whole of Middle East, but they're headquartered in Dubai. And I've had a long working relationship with them of about 2 years. I worked with them on multiple projects, but there was this one project in particular which was very fascinating to me. What they were trying to do is they were trying to build a system called as kitchen display system. And kitchen display system, or KDS, like how people in restaurants would call it. A kitchen display system is like a screen or an interface which is placed inside a kitchen, which is used by the people working inside the kitchen. So people like the chefs or order fulfillers, they use the screen to see what are the orders that they have to fulfill, the meals that they have to start preparing. And it's also used by the restaurant staff, like waiters and managers, uh, who would then pick up these orders and deliver to the customers on their table. So it was a very interesting product to work on, because the very first thing was that I had to design an interface for a TV screen, because it could be something which would just be hung on a wall, and the screen could be quite large, and people working in the kitchen, they are not really people sitting in a comfy chair and working on their fancy computer screens. It's just a display. And it could also be, the display could also be used on an iPad or on a tablet. So I'd never designed for this kind of devices. And the way that we started working on this project was we did like a campaign of user research, where I actually went to Dubai and started talking to all of these people working inside a restaurant. And I talked to people from different categories of restaurant, like a quick service restaurant, a fine dine restaurant, or a regular dining restaurant. And going over there and seeing these people in their real environments, seeing how things actually work inside the kitchen, seeing how things work inside a restaurant, it was quite an eye-opening experience. And I obviously enjoyed my time talking to them and came back with a lot of learnings about the restaurant industry. I had no idea about how people work in the restaurant before that. So I could also see that this is a real problem that they have. So a KDS is essentially a replacement of a traditional assembly line way of working. So what usually happens in restaurants is that when you enter a restaurant and you order something, the waiter would take an order from you. Now imagine if the waiter is taking an order on a smartphone or on a tablet, they would then just press a button, and there would be a printer inside the kitchen. They get a printout out of it. It's called KOT, and they take that printout and they put it on an assembly line. And that is how they start, and that is how they know what are the orders that they have to prepare. It's kind of automated, saves a lot of time and makes it efficient. But then it's printers. Come on, who loves printers? I mean, you might disagree, because Germans are known to love their paper, but the rest of the world, it's quite difficult to work with printers, and there's a lot of cost associated with it, because it's a primitive technology. Something goes wrong, you can't really fix it. It doesn't give you much other than just this KOT. You can't really measure anything over there. So KDS is essentially a replacement of that, replacing the printers with a digital system. And once you have that, then you can obviously also measure efficiency, and there are a lot of features that you can add to it. So I saw that they had this real problem that they were trying to solve. And you can also say that it is something that could be considered as the bread and butter of their business, because that's how the main part of the business is going to function. So seeing that was very useful to me. And I'm a creator at heart. I've always loved creating things. And when I create something and I see that people use it to solve their problems, the feeling that I get from that is very dear to me. So I really enjoyed going through this whole journey, and then we also creating the product later on. I'll cut it short, but after we designed the product, it actually became a standout success for them. It allowed the company to diversify their business into a few more countries. And the business also generated a lot of revenue from it. So that means the product was successful. And I take some pride into that. And I also really am very fond of those memories.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's a nice thing about working as a designer sometimes, that you can immerse yourself into different areas where you're not actually the expert in. And that's okay, because being not the expert helps people to ask questions that sometimes are stupid, but sometimes drive actually innovation by coming with a different lens to the topic. So and at the same time, of course, I think what you are highlighting here is, obviously it was about the personal impact you had on the user. And at the same time, obviously, if you can drive some business impact with that as well, that also, and it's a commercial success, this obviously also makes you good as a designer. So definitely, I think a great story and example. Talking about product disrupt for a little bit. So, I think the overarching topic being here education and inspiration for designers. What was sort of the vision for you, or sort of, how did it all started out for you? Was it somehow like a pain point for you to find a good resource for that type of content online and started to create yourself? Or how did it all start out for you? And what do you have maybe, what do you have as a vision for Product Disrupt?
Yeah, you're spot on with it. I was just trying to solve my own problem. So let me give you a little bit of context and let me take you a few years back. I studied engineering, computer engineering. So that is what I am professionally, a computer engineer. And the way that I taught myself design was by going online. And there are a lot of people online who create a lot of good stuff. So you can read blogs, you can read case studies where people describe what they created and what was the process that they followed. Then there are podcasts like this, and then there's YouTube channels and newsletters. There's so much out there. Mm-hmm. So I was always looking for content over there, and that is how I taught myself design. And once I became a designer, you can imagine that I still come from an engineering background. So most of my friends, they were engineers. And this is the year would be 2015. Design was not really a thing in India. So a lot of people still did not have any idea about what design is. And even now, a lot of people, like it's not a very well established industry yet. So what used to happen is I used to constantly get questions from my friends that what is it that you do as a designer? What does your day-to-day look like? And then also some people were also interested seeing how I'm progressing in my career. So they used to ask me that how can they also become a designer? And I used to always give them same answers. I used to share them the resources that I was following. And then one day I just got an idea that, people have been asking me this repetitive questions. Why not I just put all of these resources into a website? So it's just like creating a list. And I already had those resources. So the groundwork had already been done. I just had to share it. I had to find a way that people could access it. So I thought I would just make a simple website. And it was like a very simple job. I took like a week's time. I got a framework, customized the design of it, and put all the resources over there. And to my surprise, a friend of mine launched it on Product Hunt. And after putting it on Product Hunt, it became the product of the day. And you can imagine if something becomes a product of the day, it might get a lot of traffic. And the community of Product Hunt is also very nice. They're kind of the opposite of Hacker News. They give you a lot of positive feedback, and they are very constructive that way. And I got a lot of suggestions from them. A lot of people reached out to me saying that it was useful to them. Mm-hmm. And from there, I also got the idea of starting a newsletter. So there was this one guy, he wrote in the comment that if there was a newsletter where he could get fresh resources curated by me, he would love reading that. And then I just started Googling what is a newsletter. And then I came across MailChimp, and I just started doing it because, I always like learning new things. So first it was trying to solve my own problem, and then one thing led to another. And then now it has become like a big newsletter.
Mm-hmm. No, this is great. And I think you put in some work to keeping it fresh, because that's the thing with, creating these knowledge bases, that sometimes they fall out of accuracy, or they're not up to date anymore. So I think that's good that you put in that work, and I think it's a great resource and a cool story. I think the best designs often come from solving your own problems, and obviously if you can connect as a designer yourself to the problem you're solving, that I think is always great. If you would think about maybe maybe for people so they know a little bit more about Product Disrupt, you basically have different categories in there. So you have books, you have podcasts, you have designers, you have blogs, and so on. So if you think maybe about these resources that you have, I know that it's difficult maybe for you to pick, but if you have to pick like a couple of really good resources, maybe specifically around books and blogs, maybe are there specific ones that you would recommend to our audience, because we can link them to the description then for the audience?
So it's definitely would be hard to pick because I follow all of them quite regularly. I've not allowed peer pressure to get in there to just add things. I actually follow them on a regular basis. You might find those resources, different resources, to be useful at different stages of your career. Mm-hmm. I can tell you what I take, what are my favorite ones right now. Mm-hmm. So there's this newsletter called Dense Discovery. It's not really a design newsletter, but it's more like a newsletter where you get to discover new products. And the guy who runs the newsletter, he's also German, by the way, but he lives in Australia. And he has been doing this for, I think, more than a decade. And the quality of those resources over there is just so good. It's very fresh. I always get like hidden gems from there. And he also, the way that he writes the newsletter and delivers it is also very unique. Like it's I think my number one newsletter that I always open. Mm-hmm. So that's one. Second, in terms of blog, there's a blog called as UX Collective, or the domain is actually uxdesign.cc. Mm-hmm. And I think it's run by a group of 4 to 5 people, and I think they're from Italy. They also create a lot of good resources, and like they have the newsletter where they would feature tools and articles, and then they also have a blog where they on a weekly basis they would write articles. It's also crowdsourced. Other people can also contribute to it, but then there are also original articles written by the editors. Those are the ones usually that I always want to read. Their content is just very fresh and very relevant. It's not like content from some dated design magazine who claim to be like the design experts. It's just very fresh. So I really like that. I can't really give you much recommendations in terms of books because I'm not really a book person. I recently had just tweeted this that I read 0 books in 2021. And I think most years in my life, I don't read many books. I like to consume my content through short form mediums like reading a blog or newsletters or listening to podcasts and things like this. It just feels very natural to me. Like I can consume the short form content and I can also apply it to my life. So sorry, I don't have many book recommendations.
And that is all good. I'm also actually not reading so many books. I'm usually audio consuming books, usually while doing something else. But no, I think the resources you're sharing, I know actually both of them, I think they're really valuable. So I think we're going to definitely put this into the description. If you think about new content, so how do you usually find new content? What would be the new resources? How do you usually do that?
So I have this table that I maintain on Notion. This is where I would put in all the resources. Notion is like my lifeline. I use Notion to manage my life, basically. Yeah. And I manage the entire Product Disrupt on Notion. So what I do is I have this table always there inside Notion, and I'm constantly surfing web. The good thing is that me as a designer, it's also a part of my job to keep myself up to date and keep on learning new things. So I would naturally look out for a lot of resources related to design. So I'm subscribed to a lot of these newsletters that I've mentioned on Product Disrupt. There are many other places as well that I subscribe to, different YouTube channels and blogs and Twitter is a great place where I get a lot of recommendations. So usually I take things from there. I would only add those resources to the list if I personally see some value into it, or if I've given it a try. And I keep on adding it in the table. And after every 2 weeks, that is when I start writing my newsletter. I would then sit down and look at all those links that I've curated, and from those links, I would pick the top 10 and add it to the newsletter.
Yeah, that makes sense. To store all of your findings at one place. I think that's sometimes difficult. I had to be honest. There are good apps for that, like Pocket, for example. You can do Notion, but I notice myself sometimes storing some stuff there and storing some stuff there. Then it gets lost very easily. So that's definitely a good method to have like one place where you can collect all of your findings, right?
Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned about things getting lost, that always happens if you're using many tools. So one way that I try to make sure that these things are very accessible to me is that Notion is great because it also works in web, and it also has its application. I usually use it on web. The tab where I have to add these links, the table or the page, it is always open in one tab on my browser, and also it's there on my phone. So whenever I come across a link, all I have to do is just copy and paste it over there. I might review it later, but at least I want to capture that. And the whole process of capturing that and putting it in a central repo should be very frictionless. So that is what I've tried to do with this.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Talking about your experience at GraphCMS, I think what would be interesting, or what's interesting actually for the audience, is maybe that you started there out when you were the first designer, and now the team has actually grown, and you have actually a small team even in the design area. So I think probably a lot of designers in the audience are looking to either join a startup or working at a startup, and maybe you can share some light on that. What was your experience sort of like working as a designer in a small startup and kind of seeing it scale towards different founding rounds, etc., and what could people expect working in such an environment?
So I joined GraphCMS as a founding designer, which means that I was the first to join. When I joined, the size of the team was about 22 people. And now we are already 56. So we have more than doubled our team size just in 1.5 years. One thing is that I've always enjoyed working in smaller teams, and it just confirmed, like working at GraphCMS, it just confirmed that this is what I really enjoy. Some things that you really need to keep in mind when you're joining a smaller startup is that you might be expected to do a bit of everything. So it's really a role for a generalist. And yeah, you can be like a T-shaped designer where you have some specialties, and that would depend upon what the startup is really looking for. I think all the startups, they are going to expect you to do a bit of everything. And I actually enjoy that. It really keeps me motivated to do my work. I kind of get very bored if I'm doing the same thing over and over again. So be able to do a lot of different things. Of course, the end-to-end design, which means that you do UX, user research, user interviews, and UI, sometimes even prototyping. You also have to do the QA while working with the engineers, because there's a chance that working in a startup, you might not have a dedicated QA person. So being able to contribute to all of this, and then also being involved in the product management part of the things, where you are shaping up the problems and doing the problem discovery, all of that is going to be very crucial. And it is actually something that is expected out of you. And for things like, I don't think you need to be very talented illustrator or an icon designer, because in startups you can mostly use a lot of open source resources that are available out there for illustrations and icons. So there are a few things that you can always manage with. And then the other thing is that for startups, it's always very important to ship things, and their processes might also not be very mature. So you're working very closely with the people that you work with, and shipping things is very important. Getting things out there in the hands of the real users, getting feedback from them, and you can always iterate. That's the beauty of digital products, right? It's not like print where once it's done, you can't really do anything about it. With digital products, you can always keep on iterating on it. So startups really prioritize that because they also have they might also be going for a product market fit. They might have to have good revenue numbers so that they can raise the new round of funding. So there are all these things which would impact your work, and then you can't really say that I'm not getting to follow the end-to-end design process, or this is not how they taught me things at school. It might not be the case. And to be honest, I don't think every project needs you to go through the end-to-end like a textbook design process. Every project is kind of unique in its own way. Uh, I think your ability as a designer is really identifying when you have to do certain things. In some cases, when the problem is not clear, you are trying to do some sort of innovation. It might be very important to do problem discovery, spend a lot more time over there. So talking to the users, trying to understand their problem, doing a lot of research work. And in some cases, you might be just doing something which your competitors have already done, and it's more like a need of the hour. And it's not really like an innovation, but it has to be that it's like table stakes. And it could also be something that have been solved repetitively. In that case, it's more about execution. You just have to go out there and get it done. In that case, spending a lot of time in problem discovery, I don't think that would be a smart choice. And I think as a designer, you have to make those calls. So I would say working in a startup, you have to be fast, you have to be lean. All they say about startups, like how hard and fast it is, it's true. And that would also apply to design. It's not that all the other people in the company are working in a very fast-paced environment because it's a startup, and then design is like, hey, no, this is not how things work in design. You can't do that, right?
I absolutely agree. Also to your point that, I think one of the things that I think you learn as a designer over time is like, what's the right method or what's the right focus for what time, and I think you have to call these shots, right? There is obviously the design process like it is maybe in the textbooks or learning book, but yeah, the reality sometimes is that you just have to understand like what is most critical now, and like execute that, and define a process for the problem you're trying to solve, right? And the process might be different every time, depending on what you're trying to solve. And maybe you have to invent new processes, right? That are maybe inspired by ones you have been learning about. So yeah, I think staying flexible, I think, would be probably another one, right? Probably in your environment that you have to constantly adjust, and I think that what it makes it maybe also exciting. Thinking about, and I think another thing that is interesting in a startup, specifically maybe the ones that you are working on, working with B2B clients, right, where you have a B2B SaaS product. So if you work in a startup, like the ways to the different departments are not too long, right? So like there's actually the people who are kind of managing stuff, right? And I think specifically in the early startup, you're obviously starting to do some sales, some business development, right? And then you can do obviously user research yourself, right? You do that maybe on the UX level where you're trying to understand what is the user problem, like how do you solving it. But what I learned is that when you do that, you're still gonna have a learning process afterwards. So you put out the product, and then actually you start to market your product, and then you're gonna have additional learnings, right? Because like the sales team talks to different people, or the business development team, they try to bring the product to the market, and they constantly learn as well. And the design process get sort of driven by two things, I think. One is the own user research that you can do, but the other thing is also all the things you learn on the market front. And I could imagine, or I assume, like in a startup like you can build that bridge to the sales and marketing team very closely, because it's not a whole different departments, the whole different department and like a complex structure. The people in the team probably. Is there any kind of learning you made on that, or would you agree maybe that there are a lot of learnings coming from that side?
Yeah, absolutely. One good thing that we do in our company is that we try to keep things very transparent. And we are a remote company, so we obviously have to pay a lot of attention towards documentation. A lot of times we learn a lot of new things from our customer success team, then our sales team, and of course the product team. So what happens is that, and all of these teams, they would have different ways of working. So customer success, they do a lot of writing. Like they would always be on customer calls, and they would get a lot of notes from there, and then they would share that publicly in Slack, or maybe create a wiki in Notion. So it's always useful to get those insights from them, because they also, as you mentioned, they are focusing on different things. They have different priorities. So the kind of opinions that we get from them is obviously going to be quite different. And then in terms of sales, what we do internally is that we use this tool called Gong, which helps us record the calls and also get the transcription. So as a product team, we can also always look into that and see what are the things that people are talking about in the calls. And sales is always going to ask the questions about, this very pinpointed questions that would make them buy our product. Like they have some specific needs, and the reason why they are willing to spend the money, which means that we have something that they really want, and we can always double down on those things. So it's very useful to get those insights. And as you rightly mentioned, we also do our own research. So this is the data that we get from different teams. And the way that we would do our research is that we have set up a user panel, which is like a volunteer program where people from the community or the users that use our product, they volunteer to spend some of their time to give us feedback, to participate in user interview calls. They can also do like alpha beta testing. And we get this because we have a very active community on Slack, and our product is used by a lot of developers, and developers are usually very active. So when we have something to discuss in particular, like working on a particular feature, and we want to run a campaign, we can start talking to those people around those areas. One example could be editorial experience. The other example could be onboarding experience. So then we can dive deeper into those things. So getting insights from all these different places always helps. And this is how we would like to do things.
Mm-hmm. And that totally makes sense. And I think you're giving a couple of good pointers there also in terms of tools, how you're using it, and how do you try to manage the relationship. Considering the fact that you're head of design now at that startup, and you already said like you're hiring designers. You also talked about the importance of generalists. And I think very often, people say like in the beginning it's about generalists and then it's about specialists later on. How do you try to grow the design team and evangelize design within the company, both on the role of design, but then also when it comes to building the resource in the team?
Yeah, so there are two parts to your question. I can start with the part about how do we evangelize design. One thing that really helps is that making your work transparent and making it visible. So what we do is we have a design weekly on every Monday where where it's a time for us to reflect upon the things that we did in the last week and plan the things that we want to do this week. And we do a meeting in the design team, but all of those notes are also there inside Notion. And after the meeting, it gets shared in the relevant channels, and other people can also look into it. And they can always see what people are working on. And from there, they can also get links to the actual files. So we use Figma, and Figma is also open to all of the people in the company. At any point, they can go there, they can provide feedback, leave comments, add suggestions. So that makes the work very visible, and it also bridges this gap and clears out this fog about, a lot of people might not know what designers do, but when you are sharing these things openly, they kind of now know what do you do in your day-to-day work, and that then they can also see the value in design. So it really helps that way, making your work visible. It's not like you don't have to shove it up their throat every time. There are simple ways of doing it, like sharing this. People who are interested, they can always look at it. And it always helps if your CEO is your biggest cheerleader. That is the case in our company, that our CEO really believes in design and he understands the value of design. So he's always pushing for it. And he was actually the one who helped me out a lot in the beginning. So that always helps. So I think that finding people that can be like your champions in different teams really helps, especially in high impact teams like marketing, sales, or engineering. Because if they see the value in design, they can obviously do a lot more better job than you in actually sharing that values or insights with other people in their team. So that's one
Makes sense.
part. The second part, how do you grow the team? In our case, the way that our team is structured is that so I'm the head of design. And since we are a small team, I still do 50-50, which means that half of my time is spent managing the team and mentoring the team, and half of my time is spent doing the hands-on work for product design, because I originally started as a product designer. And then we have a product designer who does the end-to-end product design work. We have a marketing designer who works very closely with the marketing team. And we have a specialist role as well of a motion graphics and a video designer. He works with all the different teams. He puts all the bells and whistles on the things that we do. So all of these roles were born out of needs. As and when we grew the team and we started to see that design is becoming a bottleneck in some of those things, because initially it was just me doing everything. Mm-hmm. And there would come some point that I would not be able to do that. And then it becomes a bottleneck. And then we know that we have to now hire more people. So that is how we have grown our team. What we are, so I can give you some idea about the product structure. So we work in cross-functional teams at GraphCMS. A cross-functional team is where it would have a product manager, some engineers, and a product designer. So who would be able to work on features and ship the features on their own independently. So what is happening right now is, because we only have like 1.5 product designers, so one full product designer and half is me. So we kind of split the product design work between us. But our goal would be to have one dedicated product designer in all the product teams. So we can get to that velocity of doing things. And that's the reason why we are hiring a senior product designer right now. The process is on. And I think soon we would also have a need to hire more designers, because we are growing our product teams as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I think the biggest ambassador of design is probably not yourself, but obviously other teams that you work with, and by providing them value and showing the value they can do. And I think it's good that you put some emphasis on transparency, because actually that's an advantage of design, to be honest. It's actually way more difficult for a sales team, for like an engineering team, to make things very transparent compared to the role of the designer. So it's actually one of the things we are kind of gifted with, is to make our work transparent, make it accessible for people so people can see it, and document our work in a visual fashion. So, and yeah, we should make use out of that.
Definitely. And we can take a lot of inspiration from our engineering friends in this department. I think engineering is always like at least a few years ahead in any companies, because they are usually the first people to start working at a startup. And you would always see that how engineering matures. They would put a lot of emphasis on documentation and how they have these processes, rituals and different meetings. And you can always take a lot of inspiration from them, because slowly you would also be going into that direction as a design team. I still feel that a design team would never be of the same size as the engineering team. and it's also not required. So you can always see, like, if the engineering team is like number 10, then you are at like number 1, and you can always see how they progress, and then you can get some inspiration from them as well.
No, yeah, totally agree. And that ratio between engineering and design is also different between each product and company, right? I would love to continue chatting with you, Darshan. I think we had a really good conversation. I think you shared some great insights on working and scaling startup. I think that are valuable to the audience. But I think we have to wrap it up because of time. So considering that, thank you so much, Darshan, for the conversation.
Yeah, it was fantastic talking to you as well, Sebastian. I was looking forward to it. Had a good time.
All right, that was the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments or by tagging me in the post what were the biggest learnings for you in the episode. I'm always super curious about that. If the episode provided you a lot of value, make sure to follow and subscribe and share it with friends or others so they also have the chance to learn and grow themselves. All right, until next time, cheers.